All right, joining me now, Ohio Senator Rob Portman, a great friend. Senator Portman, welcome back to the show. I want to start with these new EPA water regs, which go back to the EPA NEPA permitting regs, which are making hash of your infrastructure bill, which I'm going to argue, I want to get your take. I mean, this stuff is so crazy, they won't allow anything. Highways, roads, bridges, energy, fossil fuels, they won't even, renewables, they won't even allow renewables. You tell me, what do you think about this?
Well, I think you're spot on in terms of the impact on inflation. And I'm glad to hear you say earlier that done right, infrastructure actually is counter-inflationary, which it absolutely is. It makes us more productive as a society. An example would be the bottleneck in Ohio with one huge bridge that we've been talking about for 30 years. It's going to get fixed under this bill. That'll help the economy, therefore help with regard to inflation. But the same is true with the permitting, whether it's an energy project or whether it's an agricultural project or just development in general. So what's happening right now is, on the one hand, the president is saying that inflation is too high, so we're going to make some changes to be counter-inflationary, and yet they're putting out policies that are going to add to higher inflation. And that is because the supply side is going to be diminished at a time when we should be doing all we can do to expand supply so that demand can catch up to it. So I think you're right, and unfortunately, this is the direction the administration is going on a number of fronts.
Well, you know, sir, I put it in because I wanted you to be happy. That's why I put it in. But I did also put it in because I happen to believe that it's true. I just want to ask you, regarding the infrastructure bill, I mean, these EPA regs, whether it's these new water quality or the prior regs on NEPA, aren't they violating what the legislation said?
Well, first of all, the legislation has historic changes to the permitting process, which is one thing that, we Republicans got a great win there. The Trump administration put into practice some of this, but it wasn't codified. So we actually put into law this idea that, one agency can decide the rule, that there has to be a faster time frame in terms of permitting stuff. We actually put in something where we're expanding the use of this infrastructure commission in the Congress that looks at, in the White House, that looks at different infrastructure projects. So there's a lot of positive stuff in there. But then, on the other hand, they're saying they want to change the NEPA rules, which is, of course, one of the huge issues with regard to permitting, and now this. So, yeah, it's counter to that. I would still argue that by law, we have put in stuff that they cannot counteract in terms of the actual roads and bridges and those sorts of things. But yeah, we're in a constant, as you can imagine, a constant discussion with them. We had a meeting with Secretary Buttigieg about a month ago, those of us who were involved in the infrastructure bill, and basically said this is, what you're talking about doing is counter to what the legislative intent is and what the actual statutory language says.
Yeah, well, does he care? I mean, he's the guy that went out there and said roads are racist. I mean, he doesn't want to build any roads. He doesn't want to build any highways. The irony to me is, I want to move on to China trade, but the irony to me in all this, Senator Portman, is that all this radical ideology, what is it, holistic something or other, which is a bizarre statement in a federal regulation. But this will stop renewables. Renewable projects would never meet the tests or would never happen inside of 8 or 10 years, right? And this is not only is this, states, counties, tribes, this is trial lawyers also, meaning no disrespect to our great trial lawyers, but they will have a field day on this, holding up everything.
Yeah, no, it's so true. And when you look at what's happening in terms of energy, when the administration came in, they did a number of things to stifle fossil fuel production. We all know that. It was the Keystone XL pipeline. It was, no new exploration on federal lands or waters. And just in general, an anti-fossil fuel philosophy. This is broader than that. This is about the Clean Water Act and basically saying, yes, but states, you can stop things not because of clean water, but rather you can take a holistic approach, which I suppose means, taking into account other factors like climate change. So, I mean, that's going to be a big change, and it will hurt with regard to all kinds of energy projects. By the way, solar and wind permitting is a big issue out there. It's hard to get them permitted. So it's counter even to what they're trying to do in terms of more green energy. So it's inflationary, and it is counter even to some of the things that they say they want to get done.
Holistic, by the way, includes mental. I just want to put that. We looked it up, but let's not go there, at least on this segment. I want to turn to China. There is apparently a debate inside the Biden administration about whether to pull back on any and all of the China tariffs. You were a co-signer of a bipartisan letter, if I'm not mistaken, suggesting that would not be a good idea. I was delighted to see your name on that list. Could you tell us about that? Where do you think the Bidens are going to go? And is this the time, in national security terms, certainly, or economic terms, is this the time to start pulling back on the successful Trump tariffs?
Well, first of all, there is a Section 301 report that was issued by the previous administration that lays out in detail what China does, which is not fair in terms of subsidizing their products or selling them below their costs. And therefore, this trade sanction was put into place. So it's based on a carefully thought out report, which I don't think anybody particularly disagrees with, that China is not playing by the rules. And so until they do, you have a tariff put in place. What the administration is talking about is reducing these tariffs without getting any concession from China in terms of, one, just upholding what we already agreed to in the so-called phase one of an agreement with them that the Trump administration did, but two, these broader issues that were raised in the 301 report. So I think it's a mistake, and that's why I co-signed the letter. I do believe there should be an exclusion policy. And so I may differ with some people on that, but in other words, if you're a company in America, let's say, you're bringing something in from China that is a relatively small part of your production maybe, but essential, and it's not made in America and you can't get it elsewhere, that there should be a process to look at that. The Trump administration put such an exclusion policy in place, and some companies were given an exclusion from the tariffs. So I think that's appropriate. That's been stopped as well. So there's neither an exclusion policy nor is there a decision as to whether to keep the tariffs in place or not. I think the tariffs should stay, but there should be a way, logically, reasonably, to look at appropriate exclusions. Does that make sense, Larry?
Yeah, it does. Here's my only issue on this, Senator. Look, I am a free trader, but not when it comes to China because of the absolute lack of fairness and reciprocity.
Yep.
And, I was right in the middle of the Trump trade team, and, I supported Lighthizer and the president. And I'm not sure that whole game has been resolved. I think it's going to take a longer time. I think pulling tariffs out right now would reward China for helping Russia and Ukraine, as well as for slaughtering Uyghurs, as well as for destroying Hong Kong democracy and so forth. So I just think it's the wrong time. And it's something that may be down the road, but I wouldn't look at it now. But let me ask you one more, Senator Portman. Regarding solar equipment, there's some kind of issue popping up. Biden is using the Defense Production Act, which strikes me as really not applicable to this. But what's your take on that? I mean, should we waive tariffs on solar equipment? Should we try to have homegrown solar equipment? Or a lot of the solar people, the solar farm people, want to be able to import without tariffs. Where do you come out on that?
Well, it's a very complicated issue, but bottom line for me is we do not want our economy to be once again dependent on China for something. And right now, that's where it's headed, and that's with regard to solar panels. There are just a couple of manufacturers here in the United States who are competitive right now, and what they have said to us, including one that happens to have a big facility in Ohio, is they cannot compete with China because China is not playing by the rules. And sure enough, a case was filed on that, and it was determined that there should be a study of this, which is going on right now, because it appears as though China, again, is subsidizing their solar panel production and selling them at below cost, which is illegal under our trade laws. So that is going on, and I think that's appropriate, because otherwise we're going to have no solar industry here in America. We're going to be relying on cheaper, yes, but unfairly traded Chinese products. However, the solar industry here, mostly, with the exception of those two companies, maybe another smaller one or two, are saying bring on the cheap solar panels, regardless of what China is doing in terms of fair trade or unfair trade, including the allegation, I think, which was now being studied with regard to the use of Uyghur slave labor.
Right.
So this is about the Uyghurs as well.
Right.
And so my view is allow this study to go. The Commerce Department is doing it right now. And instead, what the president announced today, as I understand it, is that he's going to move ahead with this presidential declaration saying that there shall be no tariffs on the Chinese products for, I think it's at least a year. And to me, let's get the facts and let's do this right. And if China is not playing by the rules, which I believe is true, and I believe will be borne out by this report, then we should not allow them to take over our solar industry. By the way, there's a big disagreement on this because a lot of the people who are more on the green energy side are happy to get the cheap solar panels and aren't worried about the impact on the Uyghurs or the impact on American companies here through unfair trade. So that's the issue that's being debated right now. And I come out on the fact that we ought to have an industry here in America that's able to compete. And let's make sure everybody plays by the rules.
I think you're spot on, Senator. I mean, I don't want to reward bad Chinese behavior. I just don't, on anything. And I don't want to reward bad human rights behavior, and I don't think we should be rewarding, bad national security behavior. In fact, Jeanette, right now, why, of all the things in the world to do, Senator Portman, why should this United States reward China? Period.
Yeah.
Full stop.
Yeah.
This is not the time. I mean, what would we get in return? You know what I mean? What are they going to give us that we could reliably depend on? I know we're out of time, and you're a great guest, and you're a great thinker on all this stuff. I'm just delighted to see you on this, what I regard as the right side of the Chinese trade system. We'll have some more. We'll talk some more about China trade.
Thanks,
Thank
Larry.
you, sir. Appreciate it.
Always great
very
to be
much.
on.
All right.
Take care.
Coming